And this is a red line that will cause a lot of problems. But I think that Indonesia have the ability to go beyond the system, not in one step necessarily, and not in one day, but perhaps on a plan of getting rid of riba from the economic system. Because when we build banks from the Islamic perspective, we build them as part of the riba system. They are not out of that part. And we need, in our Islamic education and research, to look into ways of building economy, not just finance, but economics that are riba-free, that invest and not loan, that gives wealth for the sake of the development of knowledge and the development of the human capital, not for the sake of the money generating money, which is the definition, the ta'rif of riba, that money generates money. We have another problem in the world of politics, and it goes in the same way. There is a 1% on the top that monopolize the politics everywhere. When we talk about nations, there are a few nations that monopolize how the world is governed by means of violence, by strong armies that crush any difference in opinion about the way the world is governed. And these armies are similar to most of the countries that we live in, that we call nation states, where there is a monopoly of power between a political elite and the rest of the people. And the political elite usually, and you see this in the Arab world in a very obvious way, they divide the people in order to rise. إن فرعون علا في الأرض وجعل أهلها شيعا يستضعف طائفة منهم. Pharaoh, Allah said in the Quran, I'm not only talking about Egypt, I'm talking in general, that Pharaoh raised himself in the land by dividing his people. وجعل أهلها شيعا. When people are divided along races and political parties and ideologies, the corrupt rises, because that is how the corrupt rises. That is how we saw in the American election recently, the rise of the corrupt. And they rise because they divided the nation into religions and sects. And it's a secular nation anyway, that is not supposed to deal with citizens according to the religion. But the way the corrupt were able to rise is by dividing the people into sects. And then Allah says, subhanahu wa ta'ala, يَسْتَضْعِفُ طَائِفَةً مِنْهُمْ. Pharaoh selected one group. Excuse me. Then the Pharaoh selected one group to be the weak link, يَسْتَضْعِفُ طَائِفَةً مِنْهُمْ. So the Pharaoh then, at the time, the Quran says, selected the children of Israel, Bani Israel, to be the scapegoat, to be the victim. And that is how pharaohs rise everywhere. And the politics of tyranny is politics that could take a democratic shape and could take a shape of kings and emperors and prime ministers and whatever. And it doesn't, and it's not only a pharaonic system. It is a value. There is a political crisis that caused a massacre of several million people in Iraq killed recently, and several million people in Syria that were killed and displaced, and everywhere in the world, you will find that the notion of a nation state and the sovereignty, what's called the sovereignty or siyada al-wataniyya of the nation state is misused and is taken without the moral component of politics. So because Syria is a sovereign state, is dawla that is siyada, therefore humanity is letting people die and letting the Syrians get wiped out from Syria for the sake of the expansion of the neighbors, for the sake of the economics that I talked about, and for the monopoly of power that I mentioned. And the human life becomes less important than the sovereignty of the state, because the sovereignty of the state in that political system has a higher priority than the human life. And even, you're not talking about 10 or 100 humans, you're talking about millions of humans that could die for the sake of the political system to continue, and without the political system to change. And that is a crisis that we have everywhere, whether we're talking about Europe or Africa or the Arab world or Southeast Asia. We are moving towards systems of monopoly of power, where the economy and the politics of nation states are not used to organize the people. Why do we have a nation state? In order for the government to take care of the affairs of the citizens, because the citizens are members of that state, and the state is working for the best interest of the people. But when the state does not work for the best interest of the people, but works for the best interest of the elite, the political and economic elite, then we have a crisis. And this crisis is felt not only in the Muslim world, but felt also in Europe, and obviously in Africa, and now in America. The problem is that there is no way of humanity getting out of this system without Islam, without us Muslims introducing a different paradigm, a different political paradigm, where humanity is equal and men and women on earth are equal. And yes, I am a citizen of Canada and we care about Canadians, but we are also human. We cooperate with everybody. We rescue everybody. You are a citizen of Indonesia and you care about the Indonesians, but you help your brothers and sisters in Burma. Burma doesn't have a sovereign state, because once the state starts to kill people, the state loses its legitimacy. It doesn't become a legitimate state anymore. And therefore, we as Muslims have a duty to stand with not just Muslims, with humanity that is persecuted beyond the borders. The borders are not made for people to be killed. The borders are made for people to be organized. And if the governments do not organize, and the politicians are living on the blood of the people, whether in Burma or Iraq or Syria or anywhere else, then we have to go to the rescue. Muslims have to go to the rescue. Politically, we Muslims are peaceful people, it is true. The Quran asks us not to transgress. وَلَا تَعْتَدُوا إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يُحِبُّ الْمُعْتَدِينَ. We are not supposed to transgress, but we also have a very important concept that is, in Arabic, is the concept of jihad, the struggle, the armed struggle. That is an Islamic concept. We left al-jihad, we left the armed struggle to small groups and gangs, really. We have in the Arab world a gang that calls itself the Islamic State. But it is a gang. It is not doing jihad, as Muhammad ﷺ asked us to do jihad. The rest of the ummah does not do jihad. as Muhammad did, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And therefore, we let those fringe groups take jihad as a slogan, and they also play within the bigger political and economic system. And they are not outside the bigger political and the economic system. I want to be brief, so I've touched on a few other points. If you look at health, صحة in the world, we have a crisis as humans. And again, Islam is the only paradigm that could correct the crisis of health worldwide. The health care and medicine has become a business. It is no longer a right. And because hospitals and medicine, pharmaceutical companies are businesses that try to maximize their profits, diseases are becoming epidemics. And people are dying everywhere in the world because they lack $1 or $2 of medicine. They can't find medicine for a few dollars, and the human life is lost because the medicine is monopolized again by part of the economic/political monopoly of the world, in which the laws themselves are going to change in order to support the monopoly of medicine. And in the name of copyright and patents, and in the name of the intellectual property